Hello and welcome to the Let's Talk Azure podcast with your host Sam Foote.
And Alan Armstrong.
If you're new here, we're a pair of Azure and Microsoft 365 focused IT security professionals.
It's episode 18 of season 5. Sam and I had a recent discussion around managing macOS using Microsoft solutions. Here are a few things we covered. How is macOS different to other operating systems to manage? What Microsoft tooling can you use to manage them? What licenses do you need? And are there any new features for macOS you should know about?
We've noticed a large number of you aren't subscribed. If you do enjoy our podcast, please do consider subscribing. It would mean a lot to us for you to show your support to the show.
It's a really great episode, so let's dive in.
Hey Alan, how are you doing this week?
Hey Sam, not doing too bad. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. My adventures with Copilot continue this week. I feel like I am, I don't know, almost forcing it to bend to my will with prompt engineering. I don't know what it is about working with a large language model, but I kind of find the more specific I am with it, I sort of feel sorry for it, if that makes sense. Right? It's like, do this thing with this specific set of data in this specific way. Oh, and don't sound too happy or unprofessional or professional or etc. etc. Right? Do you find that your prompts just sort of spiral out of control sometimes?
Yeah. I mean, when previously when I was using Chat GPT for a few things, it was like that. But yeah, in my normal day-to-day work, definitely starting to streamline them a little bit more, or at least try different things to get that, I guess, that prompt right and understand it, kind of thing.
Yeah, I do feel like the sort of reward, the feedback, and like the I don't know, the thrill of the chase, basically, right? Like when you nail the prompt and you're like, it's like almost magic, and it's sort of it's just generating all this, relatively accurate content that you can then use, and you're like, well, that's a lot easier than actually working out, how to. For me, it's more about structure of output, if that makes sense. I find that it can structure responses really well.
Yeah, it's probably one of the things that I struggle with is getting started with some of the stuff and which way do you put it, kind of thing. You're right, even if it gives you 8% of the content and the structure, at least then you can add the rest, to make it exactly what you need.
Yeah, because when I'm talking with other people, they sort of say, well, do you have to go and double check it and everything? But yes, you do, because you have to check for hallucinations and any other inaccuracies. But I just find that, I don't know. I suppose if you're only generating small amounts of content, the prompt engineering can take longer than actually writing it itself, right? But when you've got larger bulks of text, it's really efficient at that point.
Yeah, I think you've also got to remember that even when you write your own pieces of, documents and things like that, you still got to check it yourself because sometimes it makes no sense. You hallucinate yourself. Probably, the AI that's within us. Um,
Alan, are you
so
admitting something on the podcast? Are
what
you
I'm an
actually real?
AI? Well,
Well, that's how an LLM would react. Anyway, right, let's get on to our topic this week. What are we talking about, Alan?
so we're going to attempt to talk about managing macOS, generally, kind of thing, why it's different and things like that, but also how we can use Microsoft tooling to do that management kind of thing. We've talked about Windows previously. I think we've probably talked about managing, and well, maybe not in great detail, but we've talked about managing mobile phones, Android and iOS. But Mac OS seems to be the one that's alongside Windows, from a main PC, main device the user might use for their day to day. So I think it's worth sort of capturing how you can manage them, and it's not just they're in the wild and you can't do anything about them kind of thing. They are they are more expensive. They can be more expensive devices, so putting extra protection on them, because I guess they're more more appealing to go missing in some scenarios.
I love
I think that's fair to say. Well, I've seen the crazy costs of them, so but
it. Yeah, well, I think even in larger enterprises, it was some relatively decent size organizations are Mac only, right? Anyway, but I would venture to say that even in large corporate enterprises that are mainly Windows first, I bet there's a design
hmm,
department or a marketing department that you know um, wants to, for whichever reason, or maybe even development potentially, might want to start looking at utilizing Mac devices. And I suppose, how have organizations handled that previously, Alan? Have they just sort of ignored them, just kept them disconnected from everything? What's the sort of the bad
I,
practice that's happened there?
I think so. I've kind of been in this scenario previously from a few jobs ago before, consultancy, and maybe not actually having management of, or dealing with the Macs themselves directly. Um, but they tend to be kind of in this kind of thing where I said they're in the wild. They are kind of left to their to themselves. But you can we have seen organizations connect them to Active Directory because they can do that sort of authentication, so they can at least talk to other services on the network. But it doesn't really manage them. It's just providing an authentication mechanism for you to be able to authenticate with your account to SMB shares or things like that that's on the network that maybe you need access to. Um, so that's really kind of the only thing that I've seen them being used for. And this is some time ago. So the world has changed since then, and it is easier to manage them in different ways. So yeah, really, I think it's just been either the user gets the Mac, they manage it, maybe the IT check it and put some base config on it. Maybe in some organizations they actually put some an admin. I think you can do an admin account, can't you? And maybe just a standard user account on there, and the user uses the standard user. But again, there's never really any remote sort of way to manage them outside of other tooling like, I don't know, TeamViewer or something like that to jump onto the machine itself. But if the password's forgotten, then it's kind of gone from that scenario. Or if you want to do config changes, they have to be done manually on the endpoints. But like you said, Sam, if there's only a handful of them in an organization, then maybe that's okay to sort of manage that. But like you said, if some organizations have got them, across the organization and at high numbers, then central management probably should be considered.
Yeah, and I assume my assumption is that it wouldn't take that large amount of devices because of like how devices are used now. Hybrid, remote working,
Mm.
access to. I assume when you were more involved with it, it was on site. You could literally walk over to it and work on it, right? Potentially. So I'm guessing that sort of explosion in remote working. I wonder what the tipping point is for. But then I suppose we'll come on to Microsoft solutions. But if you do have to go and acquire some sort of third party tooling, just the base cost of that tooling plus any configuration and implementation could be expensive. So it must be a challenge to decide at what point you start that centralized management.
Yeah, I guess it's like I said, it's kind of that thing of one, making sure they're secure, but also you might have compliance, your regulatory compliance, requirements for maybe your a business that you work for, or partnering with, or is a an external organization that you deal with, they may have some requirements for you to have some restrictions on them, and you've in effect got to approve that as well.
Yeah.
And also keep up to date, the config, what changes, because with new versions of is it every year they bring a new new OS out for
Yeah.
Mac?
New major, OS
Yeah,
release, yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So there's always new changes and things like that then you might need to lock down, because you don't want your users to use them, because it might be more from a consumer sort of benefit, um, and things like that. So, or new capability that can then secure your access to various things.
Okay, so yeah, so Alan, I suppose a lot of people that are listening might be more Windows focused. So, how do you manage Apple devices with an MDM, and how is it different?
So because not to say because, but um, as sort of Apple products have been very containerized, isolated, not very open for users to be able to make changes to them. I mean, if you think about iOS and Android, I mean that is one extreme to the other in some form. iOS having very specific things that you can and can't do to it, even from like application creation, things like that. What you can and can't do on them. It's very containerized. Everything in effect goes through the Apple network to get your notifications and things like that. It's just how it they've sort of configured that. And then you have Android that is fairly open, and there's multiple versions of every operating system, things like that. But yeah, with macOS, it's kind of the same thing. It's it's very containerized. It's very restrictive about what you can and can't do with it, which is good because you know exactly what you can and can't do with it. Where some other ones, it's a grey area. It might depend on what type of device you have, things like that. But because it's kind of secured, most when you turn on a Mac or an Apple device, it automatically connects to the Apple network, Apple Relay, and then checks to see whether this device is managed or it's been stolen or anything like that. So you always have to go through that network and in effect connect to it. So that's one of the differences. So when doing that, when you have an MDM to do, you have to in effect get the MDM to sign up to that relay service. So that means that once you connect to that, then your MDM can then communicate with that relay service and then send policy, config, etc. down, to your devices. So that's where it's really different because with Windows, with Android, you don't necessarily have to do that. You just have to, it just connects on the internet to the Microsoft, system, and then, and then you start, being managed in effect. So that's one sort of key, or one or two key differences there. And with that sort of restriction, you have to make sure you've got all of that stuff in place first. And I guess generally with an MDM, it is slightly different because everything is containerized. So the settings are quite. When you're coming from Windows, it's quite a different sort of setup in that sense. It's very, like I said, it's very modular with what you can change and things like that. But again, that's quite good because you understand exactly what everything does on there. So yeah, I think that's generally kind of it. The other things is you can have the ability to do zero touch deployment. That's using things like the Apple automated device enrollment and the Apple Business Manager side of things, and there is also direct enrollment around that. So there is those options as well as just just signing up to your MDM using their product to start that enrollment.
Okay, nice. Yeah. So do you want to talk about maybe Apple Business Manager and how that sort of side functions?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll kind of talk about Apple Business Manager in itself first. So Apple Business Manager is kind of as it as it sounds. It's the sort of the management portal, management solution for your organization. So when you set it up, you have to give a lot of information about your organization so it can be created. There's a lot of verification there to prove that it's you are that organization. Once that's configured, there's like is there 2 or 3 parts? There's probably 2 parts to it at least. Um, no, we'll call it 3 parts actually. One part is you can have local users in there. So you can create users there that then can be used to create your organization's Apple IDs so that you can manage them from that portal. One part of that is you can actually federate with Entra and then you use your Entra IDs to sign in to Apple ID, use them as Apple IDs. That's one part. Another part is the volume purchasing program, VPP. And that is where you can purchase software to be installed from the Apple Store, and you can purchase licenses even if they're free in effect. But you can purchase them in there, and you can assign them to users, and then you can use an MDM to then deploy them to the devices with their license. So there's that part. That's where you'd purchase, say, 100 licenses of, I know, Adobe Acrobat Writer kind of thing, or another solution there. And then kind of the third part to it is that you can get your devices added to the Apple Business Manager, and they become your devices. So it's almost like in the Windows world, the Windows Autopilot device list. It's your list of your endpoints in effect. So it's a similar thing to Windows in that where you purchase if you purchase them directly from Apple, then they can automatically go into there, providing you buy it through your business account. And if you've got a supplier and they support it, then you can get them to, when you purchase them, they can then add it to your account. So then all your serial numbers and that turn up in your device. Once they're in there, you can then add within your MDM. You can then say give the Apple Business Manager a token. Is it the other way around? No, it's the other way around. In the Apple Business Manager, I think you get a token for your MDM. You give it a name, and you get this token. You put it into your MDM, and then you can then assign those devices, or a subset of those devices, to that MDM, which then means that when they go through their initial logon, they then go, "Hey, I'm a we use Contoso. We're a Contoso device. You need to sign in to it with your Apple ID, or you have to do your authentication, whichever that might be, in the Microsoft solution area. That's going to be an Entra ID sign in. It then enrolls into the MDM, and then once it's enrolled, you get to the home page. And then it will start then deploying software, deploying config, and things like that. And one of the great things about the auto enrollment side of things, so the sort of that not Intune, but the MDM and Apple Business Manager part, that's what the Apple Automated Device Enrollment part is. So the ADE, I think they called it. It was called something else before. I can't remember what it was. But that's that enrollment part. So now that's all enrolled. One great thing about it is that if for any reason you reset it, and then it got stolen or lost. If someone tries to rebuild it, reset the device, wipe it completely and put the firmware back on so it's completely clean of anything that was previously there. Because it talks back to Apple at the start, it knows it's still a Contoso device. So it comes up and says, right, put in your Contoso details in. So it has got a security mechanism in there, which is slightly different to the Windows Autopilot part, but no one can use that device unless an admin removes it from the Apple Business Manager to allow it to be used for another device, to be used by someone else. So that's really powerful there as well. So that's probably a high level part to how you sort of do that auto enrollment, zero touch enrollment using Apple Business Manager, and the the automated device enrollment.
Cool. So, what Microsoft technology integrates with, Apple Business Manager to sort of manage macOS devices?
Yes, I kind of said it unintentionally, but the main MDM is Intune. It's got the full sort of functionality there for that integration, for managing the licenses, and that. It's also got, as we kind of mentioned, Enter ID is quite key for managing your Apple IDs. So you can keep them there, because generally what might happen is I think I didn't say this before, but a user might set up an account. They may have a license against them, and then they leave the organization, and then no one can have access to that account, or a device might be activated, activation locked against that account, and no one knows the password or recovery. So you managing it through Apple Business Manager and making them use their Enter ID accounts is a bonus there. But yeah, Intune's the main MDM that we can use. It supports all of that automated integration with Apple Business Manager. Relatively simple to set up, providing you create that that connection to the network, to the Apple Relay, which is an APN, which is an Apple. I don't know why it's called APN. It's an Apple MDM push certificate. So it connects to their APN. So once you've got that in place, then you can start managing it, and then you create enrollment tokens, and things like that to then create that connection for the auto enrollment, and the VPP tokens to get the licensing and things like that pushed down. So then you can deploy the applications silently to the endpoints. So yeah, that's probably the two technologies. I mean, full macOS, there's other technology that you could use, but not really for management, because you've got Defender for Endpoint that you can deploy as well onto there.
Okay, yeah. So, what are the key things that you need to get started?
Yeah, so really, it's to get started just managing Apple or Mac OS devices. Then you need to create that Apple MDM push certificate. If that's all you're doing, and you're not going to look at automatic, device enrollment or the Apple Business Manager, then you don't necessarily need to. If you want to be able to silently install applications, then you do need Apple Business Manager, at least for the VPP part. But also there's this term of a device being supervised. So it's probably worth talking about this, because it's also for iOS devices. So if a device has already been signed into, gone past setup, and then you enroll it into an MDM, then because of the where that MDM has been installed, it doesn't have full access to the operating system. So there are some things that, so when it's installed as the user rather than at the sort of device level, I guess, it's classed as unsupervised. So you're able to deploy software, but the user has to say, yes, I want to install that, or yes, I accept that. And there's a few configurations that it's unable to touch because it's kind of in the user context, and the user's not allowed to automatically touch some of those settings in effect, or doesn't have access to the APIs in the OS to manage it. When a device is auto enrolled via the automated device enrollment via the Apple Business Manager, because it's done at the activation time, then it has full control across the operating system. So all APIs that are available to the MDM are then, you're able to install software silently, make changes to different parts, or lock it down more. So that's one key benefit there from doing automatic. There are some, what should we say, Sam? There's some caveats to that, isn't there, around getting it into the Apple Business Manager side of things, and what you have to do to be able to get it into the supervised state, which I suppose is probably worth talking about. So if you want something to be in the supervised mode, then, as I said, it's got to be done at that activation, as the machine is being set up. So, to get it into Apple Business Manager, if it's done by your supplier, or by you've bought the device by Apple, then all it needs is a factory reset, and then it will know that it's part of that MDM. But if it's been bought from the local Apple store, or it's been repurposed maybe from another, it's a I can't think of the word now, used Mac, a refurbished Mac, then you have to use the configurator app, and then you can manually sort of enroll it into Apple Business Manager, and then it can be supervised. But again, as you do that, the device is wiped, factory reset at that point. So yeah, moving into a new MDM, because maybe you want to switch MDM, or you're enrolling it again so it is supervised, then the device has to be wiped. So there's a lot of I suppose disruption for the user at that point. So we do see organizations take the stance that new devices will be enrolled in the new way, and then they work on migrating the other ones as and when they can, because users are, I guess, reluctant to have their device wiped because they've got set up how they want it, kind of thing. Is that fair to say, Sam?
Yeah, the gotcha really about having a current estate of Mac. Let's talk about like laptops and desktops,
Yeah.
because that they were the tricky ones, because iPhones and iPads were, you've been able to self-enroll those for a long time. Previous to Apple Silicon and T2 chips in Intel Macs, you can't self enroll those machines. It's once they're purchased through retail channels. So previous to those machines, I don't know how long T2's been out for. A long time. And Apple Silicon is generation 3 now. So, or generation 4 actually. Well, no, they haven't hit Max yet. But so generation 3 to generation 4 now. So I wouldn't suppose that would be an issue for enterprise or larger organizations, because they generally tend to have refresh cycles that would support that. So that's the only thing that I would just call out. And when you're ordering directly from Apple, you have to order through Apple Business. There's a completely separate Apple Store for business interactions versus Apple Retail. If you purchase Apple Retail, you'll have to manually enroll using the configurator app for the iPhone to do it for Macs, basically. So there's extra work there that you've got to do. So if you want the, seamless user buys, you purchase a Mac through Apple Business, and it gets shipped directly to the user. And when they open the device and they connect it to Wi-Fi, everything takes over. Your company, details are then shown. then you need to purchase through those Apple business channels, or a third party authorized reseller.
Yeah. Yeah, I did. Yeah, I do. Yeah, thanks for that, Sam, because that's just sort of cleared up what I was trying to say, I think. uh,
Sorry, Alan.
what?
Sorry, say it again.
I was just saying that thanks for sorting that, well, clarifying that, because that's kind of where I was going with it.
Yeah, no, all good. Yeah, it's not so much of an issue now.
No. And again, those other devices aren't, like you said, they're just deemed as unsupervised. So you can still manage them. It's just not it's not the same experience in effect, is it? So that's fine.
Yeah. So Alan, what can you manage on the devices?
Yeah. Okay. So if anyone's used Intune or an MDM before, generally you're going to these going to kind of be the standard things. So you can deploy software. You can do device restrictions. So that's setting passwords, device password limit, site, length and things like that. Restricting like is it AirDrop and things like that, so you can reduce the amount of exposure to data leaving the device. You can set up device compliance to make sure it's encrypted and things like that, because then that signal can go to conditional access, so you can make sure that the device is compliant before it has access to any of your resources. Can configure Wi-Fi, VPN, macOS extensions. You can also add some organizational branding as part of the sort of enrollment process, and you can manage some of the features as well on the endpoint. So, like I said, you can turn off some of the things. You can turn off Bluetooth on it, but I think that's probably something that some organization probably definitely wouldn't do, because we use Bluetooth mice and headsets and things like that. Alongside that, you can do certificate deployment. So you can deploy trusted certificates, as well as if you've got a certificates authority. Maybe it's an Active Directory one, or maybe you're using the new Cloud PKI. You can deploy certificates from those services and then onto the endpoint for user and device. You can manage the sort of firewall configuration. I think the bits that you can do in this is more around per app. So allowing apps individually, whether they're allowed out specifically. And not to say, of course, but you can also manage the Defender for Endpoint configuration on there, exclusions, scans, and things like that on there. So at a high level, that's the kind of things you can do when doing applications. You can search for them in effect for the store, so you don't have to worry about knowing the Apple package IDs. Just search it in the Intune portal, select it, and then you can say who gets it deployed, things like that, or if it's been brought down by VPP. The volume purchasing program via Apple Business Manager, then they appear as apps that you can then deploy.
Nice. So all the things that you would essentially want or need to configure, I think, are pretty much covered there. Especially
Yeah, I
a lot
think
more visibility than doing it manually.
and I think Microsoft have really pushed hard to get parity with they're trying to get parity as much as they can with Windows management. Where there is parity, because they are different operating systems, so they have tried to bring everything that they possibly can to it. We've seen not to say within Intune, but with other solutions like Defender for Cloud, where it's not just about their products anymore; it's about everything. sort of kind of thing. So yeah, I don't know. I am starting to see, I guess, a few more organizations start to think of looking at whether Mac can, not say replace, but trying to work out the differences now, or trying to do comparisons against Jamf now, because Jamf's been a very key Apple sort of MDM for iOS and Mac OS. But I think Microsoft have pushed as hard to sort of get a lot of parity and use as much as they can from Apple to get access to all the APIs and things like that to do that management side of things. They've definitely been closer in partnership around some of the new features they're bringing around single sign-on and things like that as well.
Nice. Yeah, this is utilizing Intune, and sort of on the Windows side, there's many different actions that you can sort of target against a device. Do you have the same capability there with Mac? And if so, what can you do with it?
Yep. So you can do remote actions. Kind of, I suppose, in somewhat obviously that a lot of the ones that you might see on the Windows devices are specific for Windows. BitLocker, key rotation is definitely not going to be on Mac OS. But yeah, you can remote wipe the device so it resets itself. You can force the synchronization. One extra that is for Apple devices is you can actually disable that activation lock, providing it's supervised. So you can stop it from being locked to, if a user leaves and things like that. You can remotely lock it if it's been left unlocked, or maybe someone's identified it might have been left in a public area. They've forgotten it, and you can remotely lock it. You can rename the device remotely, restart it, and you can retire it, which in effect removes it from the MDM. But I probably think you can't do that when it's fully automatically device enrolled. That's more around when it's just supervised. But yeah, that's the key things that you can do remotely from it. If you've also got remote help from the Intune suite, I think that also allows you to remotely, jump onto that machine as well. So yeah.
Nice. Lots of administrative actions that you can take there. So, Alan, the big question that we ask every time: what's the licensing and cost associated?
So I don't know what the costs are, because these vary, sort of location, things like that. But in effect, all that you need is the user to have the minimum is an Intune Plan 1 license, which I think it's fair to say most organizations that are in the Microsoft sort of 365 ecosystem more than likely have now. So, because it's normally part of your M365E3, it's part of even SE3 if you're splitting it. If you're not having that sort of skew, and then it's in it's in the E5s as well because it's part of the M365E3. So yeah, you just need an Intune Plan 1. It's probably recommended to probably have an Entra Plan 1 as well, just so you can do that other integration in MFA in effect, or single sign-on stuff within some of it as well. But technically, you could have Entra free with Intune Plan 1. So yeah, it's relatively, I'm gonna say simple. It's not like I said. I think I feel a lot of organizations have Intune today. I think it's been, I'm not saying long enough, but it feels like a lot of organizations are at least at that M365E3 or business premium sort of level now, to be able to use some of that extra functionality. Because of the security perspective, but this is really about device management. So, and again, this manages Windows, iOS and Android, and Mac OS. And I think there's some. I think you can do Linux and maybe Chromebook OS now as well. So you get a lot more, with that, with that Intune license anyway. And I guess if you did want remote help, which I did mention, you can buy that on its own and with as part of the Intune suite. But that is an add-on on top anyway, for most organizations.
Okay, great. Is there anything else, Alan, that you wanted to cover, around Mac management? Anything else that's, that we've missed?
So it's not our news week, I know, but and it's technically not management, but it's kind of related. But Microsoft announced, I think a couple of days ago, or this week at least, that it's in public preview now of macOS and Entra ID having this platform SSO, which means that in effect you can, using the company portal app Intune, and let me just get the name of it, the Microsoft Enterprise SSO plugin installed, that in effect you can do single sign-on into applications now, as well as, I think it might have only been websites that you could single sign-on into, but this now allows you to do that across applications as well that support it. So Microsoft 365, Outlook, things like that now all support it. And as part of this as well, it uses the Apple's secure enclave technology. So this is in effect providing a equivalent to Windows Hello, where it's using a TPM to store your authentication or your token, in effect, to perform second MFA, phishing resistant MFA, and bringing that to Mac OS. So that's in public preview at the moment. And I think, like I said, it was only announced a couple of days ago. In fact, it's probably, looking at this, the article was published a week ago, but I think it was only officially announced sort of a couple of days ago. But yeah, that means then you can use your Touch ID, potentially, to then sign into your Office applications and in M365, which I think is very, very powerful.
Yeah, definitely. Wherever we can streamline that user authentication, and also, the vast amount of, prompting and MFAing that we do, day to day, and if it's all integrated, then yeah, 100%. Because there's always been a bit of a disconnect, really, around your sort of your your Entra identity versus the local user account
Yeah.
on the machine. Because even though when it is supervised, there is still two logins that you have to manage there. So I haven't used this yet because this is, yeah, as we say, like red hot new. It's going to be really interesting to see how it improves that situation.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I thought it's worth bringing that up as we're sort of talking Mac OS from that. But yeah, nothing else. I don't think for now. There's probably more we could dive into, but I think from a first first shot at this sort of topic, I think we've covered as much as we can in our 45 minute slot.
Nice, Alan. Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, so some of the previous episodes or an episode people might want to listen to might be season 4, episode 8, where I talked about zero touch deployment. So I kind of touch all of the different types at a high level. If you want to know about some of the other ones that you can do. So yeah. So what's next then, Sam?
Yeah, so next week I'm going to cover Azure AI Search, which is a um, sort of a database, if you will, that allows you to build AI solutions which use retrieval and search, or it's more commonly referred to RAG, which is effectively a way to store data which can be pulled from large language models and used for searching. Yeah, it's a relatively new but also quite important in the world of AI and how people integrate their own large language models. So yeah, I'll be covering that next week.
Okay, great. That definitely sounds interesting. Okay, so did you enjoy this episode? If so, if so, do please consider leaving us a review on Apple or Spotify. This really helps us reach out to more people like yourselves. If you do have any specific feedback or suggestions, we have a link in our show notes to get in contact with us.
Yeah, and if you've made it this far, thanks ever so much for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Yep, thanks all.